Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TriStar webinar. My name is Thiagu Palaniappan. Today, we're going to be looking at the topic, the very important and very, most requested topic, I should say, when it comes to working with non-Creo data. So, just wanted to cover the import data doctor on how to repair some of the settings, some of the recommendations, a few techniques and tips that might help you when you're trying to repair that imported geometry, right? Now, this webinar will be recorded and it will be made available in our resource center. And during the webinar, all of you are muted, and towards the end, we will get to the question and answer session wherein you can start typing in your questions. And as you type in your questions, I'll get to that, and I'll try my best to answer those towards the end. So in the next 30 minutes or so, I'm planning to just cover this topic. And before we get going here, real quick, all of you are entered, those who are attending this, you have a chance to win a tailor-made driver, right? They are obviously, for our customers, we support them. They use PTC's Creo software as well as Windchill as their PLM system. So we thank them for this. So just wanted to let you know that you're all, we'll let you know later this, early next week as to who wins it. And please take advantage of some of the promotions we are running through the end of this September to the end of September, wherein when you get this workstation, you're also getting a seat of Creo with it. And so please reach out to your account reps at TriStar or visit our website or call us to know more information about this. Also saving, you can save on training, virtual PTC certified training. And please reach out to Jack Hamlet or visit our website to know more about this offer. Now there's also an offer on subscription, so if you can trade in your old license with a new subscription license, you can save up to 80% off, and that's also runs through the end of the September. Again, please reach out to your reps or visit our website to know more about these offers. And last thing here, we also have a promotion on the ANSYS AIM product that allows a multi-physics simulation, right? Up to 50% off on both paid up or annual lease license, right? Again, please reach out to your reps or call us to get more information about these offers. That said, the agenda that I put together this based on many requests from customers. Usually, during my industry days as well as the consulting days, I've seen a lot of users requesting import data doctor. Some information, some things. How can you better? There is no magic button, obviously, as you all know, to fix the import data doctor. But there are a few settings which will obviously help you right through that process. So in the next half hour, I wanted to just quickly talk about what exactly is IDD or import data doctor for those who have never used it before. Just based on my experience, what file types and versions that I would recommend before you import. Maybe do you have the ability to ask for a native file or a different version, etc., right? And what are the supported versions as of today by PTC? We'll talk about that. And also some of the settings, very important. You can set it up in your config, which I've seen, rather than trying to fight IDD and then try to fix the geometry, sometimes, you may be able to get rid of many of those, as you can see in that screenshot on that manifold. So many of those one-sided edges that you see there, right, the yellow edges there, those are all obviously gaps or slivers or what have you, right? How do you fix those? And do you want to really spend your time a half a day or an entire day using import data doctor, or would you rather use some quick settings wherein the software might be able to heal a good percentage of it, and then you take it from there, right? And there are some good connectivity tools, right? You can quickly check, if there is going to be tangency, continuity, is there a gap? And that's something that in Creo 3, you can, work on any solid model or surface model, and you can quickly check connectivity tools. So there are quite a few options that I'll try my best to cover this in the next half hour. I'll also show you some examples demonstrating these settings and some of the tips and techniques while working in Import Data Doctor. And meanwhile, feel free to type in your questions in the question session area or the chat area. If you're using GoToMeeting for the first time, at the very bottom, you should see there like a questions or a chat session. Feel free to start typing in those questions. So the Import Data Doctor, as some of you may have used, is actually a way. It's a fully task-based repair tool, right? That the goal being, it helps you to repair those import feature geometry. So as you all know, when you import a non-CAD, or I should say non-Creo file into Creo, it could be like an IGES or a step file, so like any other neutral file formats or even a native file format. You do get this import feature, and what do you do with that import feature, right? You can edit definition on that, and that will take you to this environment called IDD, or Import Data Doctor. Now, before we talk about the capabilities of Import Data Doctor, please keep in mind that the repair effort that you're going to put on that geometry is very much driven by, like I've listed here, the 3 bullet points as to, are you going to be using the geometry just for product structure and space claim purposes, just to assign some mass properties, right? For example, in that case, maybe the quilt as is in Creo that you get when you import might be okay, right? You may not have to really fix it, right? You may, that it's okay with that sliver or the gap. But then you may have to do, if the intent is to make use of the geometry, make some changes, do some features on top of it, so I need it solidified essentially, right? I need to calculate the mass properties exactly based on how it was sent to me, but it was done in a different CAD system, or they just could send me only the step or IGES file, or I'm planning to do some 2D drawings for it by creating some dimensions. So that's when the repair effort becomes a lot more, where you need to get into that environment and start, playing around with those geometry topology structure tree that you get. Sometimes it's, the effort could be even more when you get really cast molded components, like that example that I had in the previous slide with the manifold. Those could take quite some time, to fully fix it sometimes, right? But those settings will help you. That's what I want to quickly show you when I do the demo. So once you enter, right, once you select your feature and edit definition, you are essentially entering a mode called IDD, or Import Data Doctor. So you can see right here, so this mode, or Import Data Doctor, essentially has options to, for example, remove coincident surfaces. You can delete surfaces, create gaps, right, or search for gaps. You can define gaps or slivers, add it to the wireframe of the design, right, of that particular quilt, and then start repairing it. So mainly, some of these tools, right, that there are quite a few tools. You can move them, add boundary blend, you can add real curves, you can build your own curve. If you have a curve that's really tweaked, highly tweaked, rather than spending time fixing it, maybe it might just be easier to get rid of that and add your own curve, align it to another curve, etc. Right? So it's quite a few tools, but the ultimate goal, as you can see in this, is all I'm doing is converting that import feature to a GTS tree, or a geometry topology structure tree, right? So what that is it's just breaking down the geometry into surface IDs, as you can see, and all those individual surfaces, I can go select them, look at their tangency. I can do quite a lot of, I can extrapolate them, manipulate them, transform them, copy, paste them, what have you, right? So there are quite a few tools. This is something that you should try out, depending on the model that you get. The techniques that you would use obviously varies. Sometimes you may be able to just fix it with settings. Sometimes the settings will help you 50%, but after that you'll have to go and use some quick gap search, sliver search, and then repair it. Sometimes that may not work either. You may have to simply delete that surface and create your own new surface using boundary blends, sweeps, blends, what have you, right? Using your regular feature creation tools that we all know in Creo, right? Before we do that, like I said, before we get into the import data doctor, it's very important to decide and understand this data transfer process. I've seen customers, it's saying that, okay, when I import a step file, I myself during my industry days, a step works better than IGES, right? That's what in my experience. But could we request for the native file if available? As you know, starting Creo 3, without getting any add-on licenses, you are able to directly open or work with native files like Inventor, SolidWorks, Solid Edge, CATIA, NX, right? But the point is, if you really look at the data transfer process, it's a 3-stage or 4-stage process, right? First, from that native CAD system, they are exporting the data, and then the data gets transformed during the import process, and you're importing it, right? And once you import it, you're trying to use some feature recognition tools, maybe some editing tools to make some changes, to build some design intent into it, right? So that's really the overall process. If you think about this, why don't we attack the problem at the beginning by, instead of trying to work on this neutral file, if I could request my partner or supplier or customer to send me the actual native file, if they're willing to do that, why don't we talk to each other directly rather than a third party? That's the idea, right? So that'll really help you. So from a priority standpoint, I'd recommend to start with a native file. Now, I'm not saying that the native file is going to import perfectly. It depends on the complexity, but it's going to be much better than a step or an IGES. Now, so let's say you're saying that your customer, obviously, he is not willing to give you the SolidWorks or Inventor file, and he can give you is a step or IGES. If it's a step file, could we request him to give us an updated version of a step file that I could open in Creo, right? So that will also help a lot if you've tried it. I've played around with that, and I've seen a better release of the step version tends to, reduce that geometry loss during translation into Creo, as well as exporting from their end, right? So that's something that we always need to keep in mind. So when I say step file, as you know, within Creo, whenever you export a step file, there are config options as well as a setting where you can control what is the step version, right? Is it going to be AP214 or AP203? And so if you look at STEP, it really stands for Standard for the Exchange of Product Model Data, right? It's an international standard if you think about it. And so if you use a better version, there is a chance, you're also able to include annotations, some additional information is being added. They're continuously improving the step export format, as many of you may be aware. But the point is, if I could export a different version from Creo, they should be able to do the same thing from their end, regardless of what CAD system they use. So maybe request them for a better step version. That's the first step I would do, or at least that's the first thing I would do. And then try it out, right? It might work better than an old version. Now, from a data exchange version support standpoint, I just got this from the PTC knowledge base, and you could see this is as of today, what are the versions they support. So if you look at step file import and Creo 3, what versions they support right there. Or if you're looking to directly bring in SolidWorks files, maybe they are using 2016, just make sure that you are in Creo 3 M100, right? So this is something that you can, I'm sure all of you have a PTC.com account, and you can get the latest information on this from the knowledge base. Just do a search on data exchange version support, and you'll get this table that they continuously keep updating, right? So I would check this and then request the customer or partner or supplier or a different business unit that you guys interact with or collaborate with to provide that particular version, and you can try and import it, right? So that's the first stage, right? That's the first thing you want to do, rather than simply spending your time in import data doctor. This is the first step you should do. Next step is, let's say you did get a step file, and is there a way to know the accuracy, right? The geometry resolution or accuracy, right? As you know, in Creo, you can, when you import, you can either use the internal accuracy of your start part, that you guys have set up as a CAD admin. You guys have your own stock parts that you use with your own accuracy, or are you going to be using the external accuracy of the imported geometry? Now, in my experience, I've seen when you use absolute accuracy, I've seen a lot of times I'm getting a better imported geometry. And the good thing is, if you change accuracy, as you know, it's not going to regenerate that imported geometry. As you know, it's just one import feature. As you know, when you create new features in Creo, that's when the accuracy gets affected, right? I mean, as you know, that when you change the accuracy, new features will get regenerated, and it might impact that, but it's just an imported geometry. So better to double check on that, look for that uncertainty measure with unit, right? You can also look at the unit system, right? What unit system they use. It's something that, you can open up your step in a notepad or WordPad, what have you, and then quickly check it. And then another thing that I've seen not a lot of customers use, which I would encourage you to use, is the import profile editor. Many times I've seen, okay, somebody emails me a step file, I double click on it or open it in Creo, drag and drop in Creo, and you get this little coordinate system, as you can see here, right? So all you get is this little coordinate system and this import feature. And what about my parameters? What about my views? What about my datum planes? My CAD admin has set up some start parts and templates. I should be using that, right? I would rather have it like this, right? Rather than like here. So where I have all my start parts. So a couple of ways of doing that, right? One is, if you didn't know these import profile editor, you would create a new part with your start part, with your company's start part, and then instead of opening, you would go get data and import, right? So that's when you are making sure that you're attaching the imported step parameters file, but then into the part. It's more like create the new part and then import, rather than simply double-clicking on the step file. So now, if you were to double-click on the step file, as you know, it may come up like this, but it does give you an option. I don't know if you've noticed it, where you can go set up your own profiles. There are even some config options that you could use for this. I'll show you all this when I do the demo, where I could use templates. I can use my company's start parts. I can also set up some surface topology settings. Not sure if you guys have tried it. There used to be legacy config.pro options that we used to have. You can either use the config options, but I would at least encourage you to select the heal options, like close the gap between surfaces, repair unsatisfied geometry, right? Try to solidify, right, if you can. Join surfaces from different layers, same layers, right? So once you set these, right, you can also customize this, or make sure that, every time when I launch Creo, I shouldn't be setting these up every time. Where does it read these from? There is a config.pro called interface in profile default, wherein you can essentially provide, set up your settings as you want, right? And then save it as a DIP file, .dip file. That's the import profile editor extension, and then point it to that. Now, if you have several of them, so for example, you may run into a situation where you have a certain profile that worked for CATIA files that doesn't work for SolidWorks and NX files. You could have your own import profile editor for each one of those files, and then you could have pointed in your config.pro, right? Or set it up like I'm showing you here. So I think these are some very important steps that sometimes we forget to do, and then try to struggle with import doctor, right? So this is something that you should be doing. So let me just take a quick look at Creo here. Okay, and I'll show you a quick example. So I'm not set up any setting, nothing here, right? It's just out of the box Creo Parametric, and I'm opening up a step file that I have here. I'm just double clicking on it, right? I'm not going to do anything here. I just click OK. And you see that if I go to a darker background and to a wireframe mode, so you see that it's a surface model, right? Like another quick way to know, as you know, the blue color is telling me, or I usually do a quick analysis, right? You can just do a measure volume. If the volume is 0, guaranteed that it's having a gap, right? That's the quickest way, right? Regardless of the complexity of the design, just calculate the volume of the part, and it's 0. That tells me it's a surface, right? Okay. Now, am I going to, I know that I could, so first of all, before even we get into how to fix this, right? how to fix this so many edges there. If I look at my model tree right now, right, it's manifold, and that's it. If I go to my views, no views in there. My parameters, right? If I go to parameters, my company start part is not there. So let me try it a different way, wherein let me go open up the same file, import it, but this time I'm going to go to my profile editor, and I'm going to say let's use templates, right, for parts as well as assemblies, right? That's the first thing I'm going to do, right? So let's say I want to use those two, right? And it's going to use, a metric or inch template, what have you, right? And when I do that, it took a little bit more. However, you see how it came up with my datum planes. There it is. I can with my start part essentially, right? So if I have my OREN here, I could say give me my front view, bottom view, and all that good stuff, right? So everything. I have all my company standard. I have a good starting point. Is my point here, right? Okay. Now I look at the first thing I usually look at is the geom checks, right? I mean, you may have several geom checks. Luckily, I had only one here, but I may want to turn on the notes, and it kind of highlights quite a few issues, and it kind of walks me through. Okay, so use IDD, etc., right? So it gives you all those redefine the boundaries, and so I'm thinking, okay, it's asking me to go to IDD, right? So should I just go to IDD or select the import feature, right, essentially, and edit definition on that, right? And when I do edit definition on that, I can go right-click and enter IDD, or just click on the little symbol there, right? And I'm into the topology structure, right? So what I have is the import data doctor. You see my import feature has become a bunch of surfaces here, right? And I look at my hidden line style, right? Quite a few gaps in there or slivers. I could do a Control F search. I could search for gaps, right? And when I search for gaps, let's say I give it some value, the maximum size of the gap, and do a find now. Look at that. It's taking a while, and it finally came up, and I have quite a few gaps on there, right? So is it worthwhile adding this gap and fixing it? Or, this is kind of what I've seen, sometimes, customers, they tend to do this, so before doing this, could I have, let's step back a little bit, right? Rather than having so many gaps, let me just close out of this. So I used a template, that's it, right? I didn't do anything else. Let me open up the same part, but this time I'm going to go to my import profile editor, and I'm going to go to the topology, and I'm going to say, make sure you join surfaces if you can, right? Solidify them if you can. Heal them, repair them. Now, I wouldn't select correct tangency conditions, because I've seen really weird things happening. When, if tangency is important, you may as well recreate some of the surfaces and redo it, right? So, trying to repair it, and I click OK here, and you see it's taking a little more time, as you can see, right? It's going through its steps right there, and it's working on it. So when you do something like this, what it's trying to do is, you could see that it's amazing how you don't even have one single gap. Now, I'm not saying this just this model. I've opened a lot more complicated assemblies and parts where I have seen that the setting really help you many times. So if you look at now, if I go to my analysis and I check the volume of that part, right, you could see that there's my volume. It's a solid part, right? No slivers, no gaps, nothing. Now, as for how much it tweaked there, yeah, that's debatable, right? I mean, how much did it tweak in there to make that? But the point is, at least it created a solid model, and now you can do some feature recognition using FMX or make some changes to it, right? Or if I go look at my cross-section real quick here, so you could see, maybe if I show like a 2D view. So I think the issue where the main issue was somewhere around this area, if you remember, right? That's where we had a lot of those geom check issues, and so it looks like it has corrected that. Just I opened up the same file that you saw, right? And all I did was enable those settings. So that's something I could set it in my config.pro whenever I import step files from this particular customer. Now, if I were to import some other SolidWorks file, maybe this may not work. I may have to uncheck some of those. So that if I get tools and go to import profile editor, you have quite a few options here, right? What type of accuracy should I use, internal or external, right? Surfacing, right? Perform a G2 fix, right? Automatically create curvature continuous surface, right? That has helped me in some situations with highly organic shapes. I've seen that. So there's something that you could create multiple settings. Make sure you do a save as, put it in a dip file, and then point it in your config, right? So that's the first thing I would do. But let's say you did this and you still had gaps, right? Let's do. I already have those settings, right? Because if I do it for the session, it'll stay there, right? And let me open up another model here. It has the same settings. And open it up, and let me go to the hidden line style. And you could see that even though I had those same settings, it didn't close these. So obviously in this case, I have to go to edit definition. I can look at the geometry first, or I can look at the model tree, I should say, where, as you can see in the model tree, I do have a big component and a small component. So it looks like it has created. I do have an issue here. I have a big issue here. I have like that's like a varying gap, and this you see there's an edge just bowed around there. So just to show you different techniques using this example. So when I expand this first component, it has a bunch of surfaces. So when it says component, it's essentially one quilt, and that's another quilt, right? Okay. Now let me hide that. When I hide that, I don't see a void, right? So if I go to a shaded mode, looks good, right? So that might be a surface that we really don't need, right? Let me delete that surface. So I'm working with one component which has multiple surfaces there, right? Now I could, many times I could just simply select this, delete, and recreate my own fill surface, right? Sometimes I've done that, where if it's a flat surface, yes, you can easily do that, right? Or even like a boundary blend here. But when you have gaps like this, what is your first line of attack, right? Using import data doctor. It's more like saying, okay, I want you to find these gaps and try to fix it. So I, again, do a search, right? Control F, I'm searching for gaps. Let's say I'm going to start with 1 unit. I mean, you can play around with the value, right? And then do a find now. And what it does is it picks up quite a few, pretty much all the gaps in there, right? Except that real big void in there, right? I wouldn't call that as a gap. And when I select that, right, I brought it in, and I need to add it to the wireframe. That's important, right? So remember, you wouldn't be able to add to the wireframe if you have multiple coinciding surfaces. That's why I had to delete that first. Now I'm going to add to the wireframe and hit repair, and there it goes. So I was able to get it done that quickly, right? Okay, I'll also, no, this may not also work, may not work like what I showed you in every model. I'll show you some, we'll go back and re-import it, and I'll show other techniques too. But once you're done with this, ideally, so now if I look at my shaded mode, all I have is this guy here, and I could say, let's do a boundary blend between these two, right? Let's also add a boundary blend between these two. I can maybe add tangency conditions there. But if you look at my tree, even though I did the boundary blend, you see I still see those yellow edges telling me, informing me that they're not one unit or they're not one single quilt. I simply can drag this and drop it into that component. So the way that you do that is simply drag it and wait for it, just drop it on its head right there. That's it, right? So what it does is it merges it, right? I could have done a separate merge, in Creo, but it's better to do it right within the import data doctor tool. And now I complete that. I can convert it to a solid right here, right? And there it goes, right? So there's a solid model. So let's say, let me undo whatever I did, right? I undid that. And let's say I go back to the edit import data doctor here real quick, right? And let me just get rid of that patch, the duplicate surface patch there. And I may want to, again, maybe let's say I could have used gaps to fix that, but could I have used other methods? For example, when I did the search, I searched for gaps, and this has happened to me many times where, not every, in this case I selected every gap and it added to the wireframe, and sometimes I've seen it wouldn't even add it to the wireframe, or it wouldn't repair like I showed this in this example. So let's say I picked these little tiny gaps and I'm adding that to the wireframe and I repaired it. But let's say these type of gaps, like variable values, it couldn't do it for whatever reason, right? So in this case, you can define the gap. You can define gap or sliver, right? I could say I want that as a gap. I want to go have this as a gap, right? And I can also say, let's do a new gap and have that. And I can do a second side and have that as a gap, right? So I've really added both. And remember, it is automatically adding to the wireframe when you define a gap. You don't have to manually add it, right? So having done that, now I can hit repair, and there it goes, right? So this is another technique where when gaps with a simple search, if it doesn't work, define them, right? One other thing, I know in this case I could have simply done a boundary blend, but not every time you may have a very easy surface like what I showed you here in the real world. Could I use some other techniques wherein can I simply copy that guy and paste special that we have used in regular Creo? I could use the same thing. I could say paste special, and I'm able to essentially bring that in here, right? And maybe rotate it a little bit, right? Roughly, right? You can always just like a rough, just ballpark it somewhere nearby, right? Something like that. And this is like regular assembly if you think about it. See, you have placement tab with constraints, so I'm sure all of you know assembly. So it's just a matter of query selecting to that point and saying, let's make that coincident. Let's add a new constraint and say this one goes to that surface. And look at the color change from purple to the pale yellow or orange. It's telling me that it's fully constrained, and I'm done with it, right? But again, if I go to my hidden line style, you see how it's not merged. The same thing, right? I'm just going to drag and drop it right on top of it, right? There it goes. And I complete that, solidify that, hit OK, all set, right? Okay, so this is, this example that I showed you seems to be quite simple there, but let's take a situation where like this, right? This has happened to me a lot too, right? Wherein it's totally off, and this is where I'm just debating. Hey, should I just recreate that geometry by myself, or should I just get try to align it, bring it, extrapolate it, and all that good stuff, right? So don't think that import data doctor is simply about searching gaps. You can really start aligning. There are quite a few options. Just quite a few tools, as you can see, that that you have to definitely play around with it. Just depends. Your technique will definitely depend on first of all what type of geometry you get, right? Very highly organic shapes, some prismatic, some organic, right? Not too complex. In that case, maybe the gaps might work, but sometimes you may have to do some real work in there where, like in this case, I do have the surface outside this component, as you can see. Just to show you another technique, I could select the edge of that surface. You can see the current curvature of that surface. And if I delete that surface, see, it's almost like it reached its original domain, kind of, right? And once it does that, I have the ability to say, I can go and align. And when I align it, you see how it's highlighting the edge. And I could say align there. I can even drag it, right? And once I say it will snap, right? I could go to the surface sides, and it's giving me choices here, right? So I could say, okay, this one, maybe I want to align it, but let's align it to this surface here, right? And like this, again, I'm not saying every time this is going to work, by the way, right? Sometimes it may not work, and let's say you try to align the others, you may have something, at least something better than nothing, right? So you've got somewhere there, and now you may have to go do some little move vertex and just select that and kind of put it roughly close by. Again, you could have just defined this manually, but having done that, now I can again go to my gaps, right? And I could say, hey, let's define a gap here. Let's define a gap there, right? Let's do a new gap right in there, and let's do a side 2 right in there, right? I've added a couple of gaps, and if the repair is not possible, just close it. I know it tweaked it a little bit. You could see there, right? It tweaked it a little bit there, right? It added some material there, but again, if you're worried about that, just you can move it a little more further inside, and so that's another option, right? And then you can solidify this and hit OK and all that, right? So let me cancel out of that. I'll show you one last thing here before we open up the Q&A here. Let me open up another file. let's see. Maybe I'm not going to use any templates here. We'll just default it. Just some file here that it looks like a sheet metal part that somebody sent me, for example. Again, if I do my edit definition on that guy and go to import data doctor and look at my hidden line style, there it is, right? I do have a gap. Now, what I could do, again, you're thinking, okay, that's an easy one, right? I could just go do a boundary blend, right, between these two, right? Set up tangency, go and drag and drop it if I have to, right? There it goes, just essentially merged it. And I could say, okay, but there are some additional tools where you can even convert. So look at this surface. It looks good. I know that right now I should be able to solidify it, but can I make a change to the hole right here? I could use FMX, but within FMX or within import data doctor itself, right, I could select a couple of surfaces here, and I have some convert tools here, right there. Convert to cylinder, convert to plane, essentially kind of featurizing it to a certain extent. Remember my process that I showed you, right? Somebody's exporting it, you're importing it, transforming it, and then featurizing it, right, or editing it, right? So I could say, let's convert it to a cylinder, and there it is. I can specify the radius right now, right? There it is, right? I could specify some value, make it bigger. I hit OK. There it is, right? Or maybe I may want to maybe select some of these surfaces, and for example, these surfaces here. Looks like those are prismatic looking. They could be an extruded surface or something. I know I could have done offset surface, things like that within Creo. But, so there are ways where I could say, let's convert this guy to an extrude, right? When I've done that, I can also say, select that surface and say, let me create a datum plane and maybe do some quick offsets here. I just created a datum plane within the IDD tool, right? Let me turn it on right here. And I could just pretty much extrapolate this, right? Or I should say transform that. I could say, let's transform this using the plane and that surface. And I click OK, right? And it will, you see how it has transformed it. And what you could do is now you can go and add additional surfaces there. So what I'm saying is, and now I do have some datums in here. So, and I can, so there's something you could have also done in FMX, right, within FMX environment. But some of the tools that IDD allows, right? So getting back my PowerPoint here. Now, let's say that your customer is willing to give you the native file. Rather than fighting with import data doctor, like I said earlier, try to get the native file and you can import or open, right? So open means you're not converting it. You're just keeping the native file as is. Only if you try to make a change, it'll request to import. So the first two options, the bullet points included in the base package, the last two if you want to do an update when they change it at their end, and if you want to do a save as in those formats, those are specific collaboration extension licenses that you'll have to get, right? But the first two are out of the box in the base Creo. Now, once you import, I know I showed you some recognition tools in import data doctor, but PTC, obviously, as you know, they have a direct editing environment within Creo Parametric called FMX that allows you to make quick changes, right, where we can identify patterns, for example, do analytical changes, right, do move, rotate based on dimensions, right, without the feature tree. So that's more for editing. So it's more like, so let's say I got a geometry like that. I could do quick, smart selections like boss, cut, round, etc., or give me all the radii with the convex, or that are concave, or that have the same value, and I would like to offset them. And when I offset them, I could have some additional control. So this is more of a fully editing tool. All these that you see, right? You're just selecting it, transforming it, doing some recognition, right? Attaching it, removing features, etc. Right? So hopefully that gave you a good overview of how to really work with imported geometry, mainly focusing on import data doctor. Let me see if we have any questions at this point. Okay, so do you have any good design practices to provide to the designer to help design the part appropriately to help prevent import errors? Great question. Now, it depends on the CAD system, right? Obviously. So when I say, CAD system, let's say that geometry was done in SolidWorks or Inventor or some other system other than Creo, right? And they are sending you the step or IGES file. Like I said, you always try to request for the native file, but if they had, and you have no choice, but they sent you the step or IGES file, you got to work with it. On their end, yeah, I mean, they need to make sure, right, just like in Creo Parametric, right, when I create a model, I need to make sure that, I don't have any geometry checks. The geom check is one thing I would always look at and make sure that it's not there, right? So when I say geom checks, it'll, like I showed you with that manifold example where it highlighted. So that's something I'm pretty sure in the other CAD system, there are geometry checks wherein if you take that model to stress analysis or manufacturing toolpath sequences, for example, it should tell you, hey, there's a problem. I do have a really tiny edge that's probably less than the accuracy, the absolute accuracy, right, of the software or of that part. So they need to make sure they do that up front, right, in their CAD system to at least, that will kind of help at least reduce these errors for sure, yeah. And also the version, right, when they're exporting, what version should they be using, right? What step version should they be using? I'm sure they have a config option like we have where they could give you a better step file because step has been, the step version has been improved over the years and many customers are not aware of that, right? So that's the first question. Let me get to the next one. With very complex plastic parts, how can we reduce the size or complexity of the part? That's a good question. Now when it's the file size, as you know, is very much dependent on the geometry itself, right? How detailed the geometry is, right? So what you could do is, you could use a remove command, like I think you have a, remove. You're asking about removing vents, holes, grids, ribs. Is there an easy way? Yeah, there is a remove tool. In Creo, there is a remove tool. I'm not sure if you have tried it. There is under editing tab, there is a, let me just go back here. So in Creo, if you go to editing, there is this remove tool wherein you could select that whole surface right there and say remove and it'll fill it, right? So that's something you can do it within FMX or within Creo. That's been there since Wildfire 4, right? Okay. But for reducing the size itself, if I understand that question correctly, if you want to send it to somebody else with a reduced file size, not all the details, then I would try a shrink wrap, right? That's a better option where do a save as of shrink wrap if it's from Creo. And then, you get to control the quality and you can exclude a few surfaces, fill holes, etc., right? Let's see. Dan is asking, can you go back to the example with the displayed surface and show how you erased the edge and then aligned it? Oh, okay, sure, definitely, right? So, so what I did was, let me close out of that. So let's say I use the templates here. I believe that was the one, right? I think this is what Dan, you're asking about. But let's say I go to this shade with edges here, and so what I'm doing is essentially selecting the edge of the surface, right? Not the surface itself, and deleting it. So I'm deleting the natural wireframe UV edge of the surface that got imported. That's what I'm really doing here, right? And you see how it extrapolated a little bit there, right? It went to its domain, original domain, as if that was not there. And then what I do, I select the surface and I say, let's try to align it. And then it will walk you through, it just picks up a random edge there, and I could say, okay, right? And I go to my sides, and I could say, okay, let's go to this one, right? I could keep clicking. See, right now I have all four, actually, right? And I can go right there, and it aligns it, and that's how I did that. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question, Dan. And next question, remove the thickness of the plastic and make it full solid. Here I'm talking about a plastic piece with a ton of vent holes and ribs. We need to make it solid and not thin plastic. Remove the thickness of the plastic and make it a full solid. Oh, yeah, if you have to make it a full solid, as long as you don't have any gaps, right? As long as you don't have any gaps and slivers, you should be able to solidify it, right? That's what I would think, right, Mark? So is this topic available in video? Absolutely. So Antonio, yeah, we are. If you haven't visited our website yet, right? We got like let me quickly show you that we run these every Thursday. We run these webinars, and if I go to TriStar.com, right, and if you go to our resource center, so if I go to the resource center, let me just move away here, and resource center, if you hit CAD or PLM, depending on the product, right? So at TriStar, our engineering services team, right? What we do, whoever is available, we put together these webinar. We run these webinars, right, on different topics on the PTC product as well as the ANSYS product, and we have it in here. So, for example, resolving failures. My coworker did that a couple of weeks last week, I believe. And then framework design, right there, I did a few weeks ago. So, like this, please feel free to check these, right? There are quite a few in there, right? You could keep hitting next, or you could search for them. Also for PLM, right? So, just like for CAD, you can go to data management, product development, simulation. So yeah, all including this that I've just done, they're all recorded, right? So if any of your coworkers would like to see it, feel free to point them to the resource center. When will this webinar's material be available for future reference? Yeah, I mean our marketing department, they will add this by hopefully by the end of the day. I'm recording this as we speak, including this Q&A session, so we will have all this uploaded hopefully by the end of the day, or at least early tomorrow. All right, so looks like, let me see if there's any other questions that I may have missed out here. Sean says, thank you. I didn't realize that import data doctor was this powerful. Yeah, thank you. Nice to hear that. Yeah, even I mean during my industry days, I used to use it when we had like those type of imported geometry. Over the years, compared to Wildfire 3, right? Those of you use the Wildfire releases, I know the interface looks a little bit different, right, with the ribbon and everything, but all this used to be there for a long time. It's just that, you got to, like I said, it's not a magic button. I have to be honest with you, right? It is not a magic button where you just go import data doctor and everything is it's nice, and it takes a little bit for you to come up with a good methodology. I just showed you, like, just to attack the problem at the very beginning, right? Sometimes let's just look at the file type, let's look at the version, let's look at the settings, right? And then once you are done all that, then you get into import data doctor, and that's where, right, I showed you some of the techniques, and I've not shown you many of those. You can definitely play around with that, get one of your most complex files, and then try to work with that. It's very powerful. Yeah. Antonio says very informative. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks actually for your time. All right, so it looks like I know we went well over 30 minutes here. Yeah, thank you. So let's wrap up here. Let me just get back to my slides real quick. So please remember that all of you, I think whoever is logged in, you have a chance to win the tailor-made driver, right? Also, please reach out to your account reps at TriStar or visit our website to know more about this offer, wherein you get the workstation and Creo in it, right, for $3K. And then, you know, we are PTC's largest reseller, TriStar, right? And our engineers are also certified instructors for PTC. So we do standard training, custom training. So we do have an offer on the certified training on the Creo product. It's a time-limited offer that runs through end of September. And then you also have the subscription offer, right? That's up to 80% off on a new subscription license. And also the ANSYS AIM product, right? So if you want to do multi-physics simulation using the new ANSYS AIM, you know, we have done a few webinars on that too, so feel free to check it out if you're hearing about ANSYS AIM for the first time. And then please reach out to us if you have any additional questions on these offers, right? Okay, so thank you, and all of you have a great rest of the day and a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in another webinar. Thank you.